Remember when space strategy meant buggy interfaces, bizarre alien diplomacy, or just trying to run an empire from a galaxy map that looked more like a tax return? Those games were once giants, and now they're barely mentioned. Welcome back to LT Gaming, the place where we deep dive into strategy, RPGs, and the odd indie gem without all the hype or clickbait. Now, when people think of space strategy, they usually name the heavyweights: Stellaris, Master of Orion, or maybe the Endless Space 2, and they are great, don't get me wrong. But behind these titans lies a whole constellation of games that once burned brightly, shaped the genre in surprising ways, and then promptly drifted into obscurity. And this is where we're heading to today. Forgotten legends, the cult classics, flawed experiments. These games left fingerprints all over the genre, even if nobody talks about them anymore. Some of them have remasters, some are still thriving on mod scenes, but all of them deserve another look. So buckle in, fire up the jump drives, and if you enjoy this kind of deep dive content into hidden history, consider joining LT Gaming by subscribing. It's free, it helps us out, and you'll never miss the next expedition into the unknown. Okay, let's roll. Our first stop is Emperor of the Fading Suns, released back in 1996. This was a game that was sky high with ambition, feudal noble houses vying for the throne, priests declaring holy wars, and merchant guilds pulling strings in the shadows. It set out to capture politics, religion, and empire building all in one package, long before most strategy games had even dreamed of it. On paper, it was extraordinary, a galactic layer of diplomacy and intrigue, planetary management that let you shape your worlds, and even tactical hex-based ground battles. It was civilization in space, total war, and Crusader kings all blended into one. For its time, it was absolutely stellar. Now, it wasn't without its issues. The AI could be erratic, the balance was shaky, and the interface had the charm of a mid-90s spreadsheet. But here's the thing, for those who played it, Emperor of the Fading Suns left a mark. It was bold, messy, and unforgettable. The best part, it's not trapped in the 90s anymore. A remastered edition landed recently, smoothing out the rough edges, fixing bugs, and modernising the UI. On top of that, there's still a modding community, patching balance, improving the AI, and even adding new scenarios. You can jump in today and experience it without wrestling through DOSBox. In the grand history of space strategy, Emperor of the Fading Suns is a flawed but vital ancestor. It dared to simulate an entire empire's politics and religion at a time when most strategy games were figuring out how to draw a proper galaxy map. For that ambition alone, it deserves its place as a forgotten legend. Next up is Ascendency, released in 1995. At first glance, this game looks almost playful. Colourful planets, bold alien portraits, and a UI that feels like it belongs on a Saturday morning cartoon. But don't let the art style fool you. Underneath was a surprisingly ambitious and imaginative 4X strategy game. Its big hook was the aliens. Each race came with its own strengths, quirks, and unique personality. One empire might be diplomatic and quirky, another aggressive and unrelenting, and their AI reflected those traits. That asymmetry gave the galaxy a sense of life and unpredictability that set it apart from its contemporaries. The downside with this one was the original release had famously weak AI. Sometimes your rivals felt more like passive neighbours than genuine threats. But much like Emperor of the Fading Suns, the community stepped in. Fan patches revitalised the AI, making it competitive and challenging, and those fixes mean the game is playable today if you fancy diving in. In the broader history of space strategy, Ascendency stands out as one of the first games to truly give its factions character. It wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, it was about dealing with strange, eccentric aliens who felt different from each other in very meaningful ways, and you can see its influence in modern games like Stellaris, where alien personality is one of the genre's main draws. While it might not have the balance or polish of Masters of Orion, Ascendancy deserves its place as a forgotten legend, a colourful experiment that pushed the genre towards something more alive. My love affair with this next series actually began with the third version, Space Empires 3. It was the first game that showed me how deep and unrestrained a space strategy could be. But while Space Empires 3 pulled me in, it was Space Empires 4 where the series truly peaked, and for me it's still the pinnacle. Released back in 2000, Space Empires 4 was the ultimate sandbox. Ship design was absurdly detailed. You could tweak every slot, weapon and system. The tech tree sprawled across dozens of branches, letting you chase whatever mad science project took your fancy. Terraforming, government structures, racial traits, it was all there, all customizable. If Master of Orion II felt carefully balanced, Space Empires 4 felt limitless. I poured hours into it, building ridiculous fleets, testing crazy tech combos and occasionally breaking my own campaigns with designs that AI simply couldn't handle. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like my galaxy in a way no other game did at the time. And the best part is the community kept this one alive. Even now you'll find mods adding new races, tech trees and balance overhauls, and it makes it very playable even in the modern day. The grand history of this genre, Space Empires 4 is the mad scientist, not refining the formula but handing players the tool to experiment, tinker and push systems until they broke. That open-ended spirit lives on in the modern giants like Stellaris, but for me Space Empires 4 will always be the game that made space strategy feel infinite and massive. A forgotten legend and one I'll always have a soft spot for. Now jumping forward to 2014 with Distant Worlds Universe, a game that didn't just give you the galaxy, it gave you an entire living ecosystem. Where most 4X titles focused on a handful of systems, this one dropped you into hundreds, each filled with colonies, pirates, trade routes, and independent factions going about their business whether you noticed them or not. And that was the magic of the game. The galaxy didn't revolve around you, you were just one civilization among many, trying to carve out a place in a wider drama. Empires rose and fell, smugglers made their fortunes, pirates preyed on your shipping lanes, and you had to decide whether to micromanage every detail, or step back and let your automated governors run the show. Of course, it could be overwhelming, interfaces dense, graphics were functional rather than flashy, and a lot of new players bounced off it within the first few hours. But if you stuck with it, no other strategy game felt quite like running an empire in a truly living galaxy. And it's still very playable today, and the modding community's done a huge amount of work, from quality of life patches and AI improvements to expanded tech trees and content packs. And while Distant Worlds 2 now exists, many veterans still swear by Universe as the more stable, feature-complete version. In the pantheon of space strategy, I feel Distant Worlds Universe has earned its place as one of those games that really captures the feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. It may not be talked about much these days, but for those who get stuck into it, Distant Worlds is unforgettable, a forgotten legend that showed us just how alive a strategy game could be. Next we've got Imperium Galactica II. Released in 1999, this one tried to do everything at once, and honestly that ambition is what makes it such a fascinating forgotten legend. On the 4X side you had the usual suspects, colonising worlds, researching tech, managing diplomacy with alien factions. But when the fighting broke out, the game zoomed in to full 3D real-time battles, where you directed entire fleets or managed ground armies as they fought across alien terrain. It was ambitious, cinematic, the kind of game that wanted to be both Master of Orion and Command & Conquer at the same time. And while it never reached the polish of either, it offered something no one else really attempted at that scale. The downside was timing. By the late 90s the strategy field was crowded, and Imperium Galactica 2 never had the marketing push to compete with giants like StarCraft or Civ 2, and the result is it quietly slipped into obscurity. But it is far from dead. Imperium Galactica 2 is available on GOG today and patched for modern systems, and the community has built mods that update visuals, rebalance combat and keep the experience alive. If you've ever wondered what a hybrid of 4X grand strategy and tactical RTS battles looks like, this one is worth your time. In the wider history of space strategy, it stands out as one of those bold experiments, a game that asked why can't we do everything. Modern titles like Total War have mastered that blend of grand planning, but this game was already chasing that dream back in '99, and it doesn't get the recognition it deserves, but it's a fascinating branch of the genre's family tree, and a reminder of how ambitious designers were willing to be back then. Also in 1999, we got Star Trek Birth of the Federation, one of the rare times the Star Trek universe was given a proper 4X strategy treatment. On paper, it was a dream come true. You could lead the Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans, the Cardassians, or even the Ferengi, expanding across a galactic map packed with familiar star systems and species straight from the shows. The appeal was obvious, bringing Bajor into the Federation, skirmishing in the neutral zone, or watching Romulans plot in the shadows. It felt like it was playing out an episode of Trek on a galactic scale. And while it nailed the atmosphere, the game itself was a bit rough around the edges. Tactical battles were clunky, balance was a bit shaky, and without expansions or long-term support, it never evolved into the classic it should have been. And this is where fans stepped in. The modding community kept Birth of the Federation alive for decades, with massive overhauls like the Ultimate Dominion mod, adding new factions, improved AI, fresh content. And thanks to those mods, it's still playable today, and far more fun than the version that shipped back in '99. Historically, it deserves recognition because it's one of the first true attempts to merge a beloved sci-fi IP with deep 4X mechanics. Long before Stellaris gave us mods to roleplay at Star Trek Empires, Birth of the Federation let you do it officially. It is a game that rarely gets mentioned now outside of the loyal Trek fans, and it was legendary. And with the right mods, it still can be. Fast forward to 2015 and we land on Star Ruler II, a game that quietly slipped under the radar, which might be one of the most inventive space 4X titles of the last decade. Rather than sticking to the classic tech tree, it threw out the rulebook and tied progress to sprawling diplomacy and influence system. You didn't just unlock lasers, you jockeyed for seats in the Galactic Council, played political cards, and fought to control the flow of influence across the stars. It made the late game about politics as much as fleets, and it was a refreshing twist. And when it came to fleets, Star Ruler II thought big. Entire procedurally generated galaxies, ships designed to your liking, and the ability to scale up to absurd juggernauts the size of planets. Sheer sense of scale was unmatched. But despite all that ambition, it never really found a wide audience. Released with little marketing from a small studio, it really struggled to compete against bigger names, and the developer eventually closed. Thankfully, the community refused to let it die. A massive community patch emerged, fixing bugs, balancing systems, and adding content. In many ways, Star Ruler II is better now than it ever was at launch, and still absolutely worth playing if you want a different flavour. In the history of the genre, it's a cult legend. Brilliant ideas, bold experiments, and a loyal fanbase that wouldn't let it fade completely. Forgotten by the mainstream, maybe, but unforgettable once you've played it. Final stop takes us back to 1996 with Fragile Allegiance, with a strategy game that is as quirky as it is endearing. Instead of spanning galaxies, you build your empire across asteroid colonies. Each rock could be mined, developed, and fortified, while rival corporations and alien factions tried to muscle in on your turf. It was part economic sim, part survival, part sabotage fest, where deals and betrayals mattered just as much as shipbuilding. What set this one apart though was its personality. Alien races came with really eccentric designs and wonderfully odd diplomacy messages. One might gush about how great you are, the other might threaten to wipe you out for something very trivial. It gave the game a charm and humour that stood out in a genre often obsessed with spreadsheets and stern galactic councils. Unlike some of the deeper titles we've covered, Fragile Allegiance is surprisingly easy to revisit today. It's available on GOG, runs smoothly on modern systems, and while the modding scene isn't as lively as with Space Empires or Birth of the Federation, there are fan patches and community tweaks that make it a painless experience. In the wider history of space strategy, Fragile Allegiance is this delightful oddball. Smaller in scope, but bursting with character. It showed that space strategy didn't always have to be solemn or galaxy spanning, and it could be colourful and fun. It might not sit alongside the titans of the genre, but as a forgotten legend, it's earned its place for sheer uniqueness and the perfect note to end this journey on. Thanks for tuning in, guys.